Hi everyone and welcome to Artist Spotlight. This is Eoin here from the Carducci Quartet. We're really lucky in what we do that we get the chance to meet and perform with so many fantastic musicians. So I got together with the wonderful guitarist Craig Ogden and we had a chat about a bit of everything, growing up in Australia, his career and influences, and even his love of tennis. I hope you enjoy it. So, Craig, thanks for talking to me today. We're obviously particularly looking forward to playing again together in Highnam in May. But I was trying to remember. Can you remember how long ago it is since we started working together?
It's very difficult to remember. I reckon in the zone of 10 years or so, but the whole, lockdown in effect removed 2 or 3 years. So remembering has become incredibly difficult, but something like that.
Yeah. And I suppose we've done, it's mostly been the more Latin kind of stuff, hasn't it? Been the Fandango and Piazzolla, stuff like that. But we should really start looking at, more, a wider range of repertoire, shouldn't we?
There is a surprising amount for guitar and string quartet, actually, across periods and styles, increasing quantities of contemporary stuff, and not always contemporary, inaccessible contemporary, but really fun pieces as well. So there's quite a lot to explore.
Yeah, for sure. We're going to look at that. Definitely. Right, let's go back to the beginning. So, Craig, tell us where and when your musical life began.
When I was about 5, I really fell in love with the albums of John Denver. And that's not a name that every generation will be familiar with these days. But when I was a kid, John Denver was, if I was talking to school kids, even though stylistically it's different and the nationality is different, I might reference someone like Ed Sheeran.
Right.
In terms of popularity, John Denver was incredibly popular, although it was North American folk music, really, sort of singer-songwriter, pop folk stuff. But when I was 5, I loved it, and that put the sound of the guitar in my head, even though it was strumming rather than classical plucking.
Sure.
But I nagged my parents for a couple of years. They caved in when I was 7. I started having lessons on the premise of John Denver stuff, but I was introduced to and soon gravitated towards a classical style of playing.
That's interesting. I had a kind of a similar thing. My granddad was a traditional fiddle player.
Yeah.
And that was the reason why I wanted to play the fiddle. I was very disappointed to find out that it didn't take batteries and play itself. But that's another story. Maybe that's why I became a viola player.
Yeah.
But yeah. But then I went down the classical route completely. So you went pure classical.
Yeah,
in your
I
training?
never really acquired. I'm interested in all styles of music, but I never really felt passionate about any other style of music more than I did classical.
Yeah.
From the age of 13, I was playing percussion, mostly orchestral percussion, but a little bit of kit in wind orchestras or jazz bands, things like that.
Okay.
But guitar was always my first love, but percussion was a strong second, and it provided me with some really profoundly important musical experiences. Well, I was through my teens.
Yeah, I was thinking that because you kind of got the best of both worlds there, because you had that full symphony orchestra experience that a lot of us, orchestral instrument musicians got that, as kids playing in big symphony orchestras, going on tours, all those kind of things. So you had those experiences, but then you also had your love of guitar.
One of the things that got me started was my 2 brothers my older brother played clarinet, younger one trumpet. And the school, we didn't have strings in our school. They had a wind ensemble, a wind orchestra. They were always going on tours to various places around the state, and the guitarists never got to go, even though there was a guitar ensemble. I felt I was missing out. So I asked about, what they might need. Originally, I'd asked about oboe, but thank heavens they steered me in the direction of oboe's way too difficult. I had much more fun just hitting things. And so that, for me, was incredibly formative. And it did provide me with a forum for learning those crucial skills: counting, following, working with others, thinking together. And that's been hugely impactful on the development of my career as a guitarist.
Yeah, in terms of rhythmic intricacy, all those kind of things, percussion is so demanding from that point of view, isn't it?
You're just hitting things, and it's in time or it's not. There's no room for error ultimately, and it makes you think in a very specific way rhythmically, which is the only thing that bonds you together when you're playing chamber music.
Yeah. And so this was in Australia?
Yeah.
So whereabouts in Australia are you from?
I grew up in Perth. We lived in Brisbane for 3 years, between, for me, the ages of 9 to 12, but otherwise, yeah, Perth.
Cool. And then at what point did you move over to this part of the world?
I did my degree in Perth at the University of Western Australia from 85 to 88. Had a year out working and applying for awards and scholarships, and then came to the UK in the beginning of 1990. Had 5 months of private lessons, then went back to Australia to play a Henze chamber opera, and then came back and started college a little bit late in October of 1990 and had 2 years as a postgrad at the Royal Northern.
So you've been here a long time?
Yeah, and I started teaching at the Royal Northern when I graduated. I cheekily talked my way into a 1 hour a week teaching job, teaching ensemble skills for guitarists. Right. And that's where the percussion experience, that's one of the first manifestations of its incredible usefulness professionally, is it enabled me to talk my way into that job. So I've just had an email from college acknowledging my 30 years of teaching there.
Wow.
I started off, literally 1 hour a week. And then I started teaching alongside my teacher. And then after many years, he retired and I took over and brought younger colleagues in. So, it's been a long time. But
amazing. And so you've got a big class of guitar students there now, right?
There's 15 at the moment. It's been as high as 25.
Wow. But
anywhere between 12 and 18 is a very healthy guitar department.
Fantastic. Yeah. And do you teach elsewhere as well? Do you kind of visiting?
I do classes. It's the equivalent of me in Scotland, Birmingham, Wales, and the London colleges. Lovely bunch of guys and girls. We all get on really well. We all do classes for each other. We examine for each other. For a while, I was doing some regular extra teaching at the Royal College. But then that was difficult to maintain, and so I do other bits and bobs elsewhere, and have some lovely private students as well.
Fab, brilliant. Well, they're very lucky to have you, I'm sure. Okay, so let's talk about the guitar itself. I mean, so you talked about John Denver. Did you play any other instruments other than the percussion? Did you kind of try a few other solo instruments, or was that just the one?
No, guitar was the one I was only ever focused on. I fell in love with it. I never fell out of love with it. So it's always been that. But in terms of points of inspiration, when I was growing up, the two globally dominant names were John Williams and Julian Bream. Mm-hmm. Andre Segovia passed me by a little bit, just because for my generation, Williams and Bream were the ones that were active. Segovia was alive when I was younger, but I never got to see him play. So Williams and Bream had this global sort of duopoly. And so they were the recordings I listened to, and both of them were a huge influence in different ways.
Yeah, amazing. And so I suppose looking at your career so far, do any kind of highlights stand out? Do you have any kind of things that you just think, wow, I can't believe I did that, or
Yeah, I think particularly coming from Perth, which is I read it's the most isolated capital city in the world. And Western Australia wasn't even formally settled until 1829 or 1827. I should know that. 1829, I think. Which, that's more recent than the age of the house I live in. And so coming to London and playing in some of those venues is mind-blowing. So probably in terms of that sort of experience, probably playing as a soloist with orchestra at the Royal Albert Hall was a big moment career-wise, and but I had the chance to play with John Williams, and bearing in mind Williams and Bream together were definitely the two guitarists that you couldn't help but look up to. To share a stage with Williams was an incredible experience as well.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So I've been lucky enough to play at the Wigmore Hall. And with the Carducci string quartet, obviously. But it's difficult to single things too much. But then there are inevitably the big venues. If you're lucky enough to play there, they will stand out. So Royal Albert Hall's probably a really notable one for me.
Yeah, so I mean, I suppose leading on from that, looking at all those incredible opportunities and highlights that you've had, I suppose this question, what are the best and worst parts of life as a professional musician? A bit, potentially controversial, but what do you think?
Well, the best part of being a musician is you can't answer it in too simplistic a way, but probably the best thing is the feeling of working collaboratively with other people. Making music is an amazing ephemeral. It's sound art, but it's ephemeral. It's in the moment. It's there and it's gone unless you're recording it. And doing that with people, there's something incredibly special about that. It's a human connection on a different level to speech or even visual, although obviously the visual comes into it. But crafting phrase shapes mutually is a really amazing way to connect with people. And I love that. And working with people that you get on with incredibly well personally is also really special. Alison Stevens was an amazing mandolin player who tragically died when she was 40. But she was an incredible life force, and the joy she had in music making. She'd just sit there smiling at me like Cheshire Cat. It was amazing. So it is, in many ways, the experience of making music with other people. But I love practicing the guitar. The physical act of going from not being able to do something to being able to do it. I find huge joy in that.
Yeah, and I suppose the nature of the guitar, so much of its existence is as a solo instrument as well. So you do have that kind of benefit of being able to play, a proper solo instrument in its own right. It's got such a vast repertoire as a solo instrument too.
Practicing the guitar on its own is really rewarding. You're, frequently just practicing solo pieces. They're musically complete, and taking those from, early stages to latter stages to where you can perform them with confidence is incredibly rewarding. The only downside for me is the fact that life is structured in such a way that your financial outgoings are regular and your income tends to be variable. It is variable from month to month and year to year. And that makes for some real challenges.
Absolutely.
So for me, that's the only significant downside. Some people might say they hate those tired, late drives home from gigs. I've driven home sort of 5-hour drives because you need to be somewhere the next day. We all do it.
Yeah.
It's not fun, but I've not yet grown weary of those solitary times. It's time to think and relax and reflect, and I quite enjoy that time.
Yeah.
And we, if you're lucky enough to be doing concerts, then you're inevitably in the car or on a plane or whatever. But most of my work's in the UK at the moment, so for me, it's driving.
Yeah. And
it can be a downside, but for me, the only significant downside is the challenge of matching regular outgoings with variable incomings.
Yeah. But it's it's kind of the two-edged sword, isn't it? Because the unpredictability of it means that it never gets stale. You're always doing something different.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, sometimes because, as you said, the same payments are going out every month. That it would be nice to know for certain that the same payments are coming in to correlate with that.
Absolutely.
And sometimes it's like buses. You'll have a month that is incredibly busy, and then you have quite a quiet month in comparison.
Yeah.
But it's juggling that. Okay, so let's describe what is it like a typical week for you at the moment. Between your various different activities.
Yeah, I mean, a typical week for me starts in the best possible way on a Monday morning with 2 hours of tennis. I play tennis every Monday that I'm here, which is Mondays are reliably a day at home for me. So from 8 to 10 in the morning, I'm playing tennis.
Amazing.
I then will frequently have a private student between 11 and 1. Normally, Tuesday, some teaching, practice, work, or, there's always things to do. Tuesday evening, I normally go up to Manchester, where I stay and teach for 2 big days, from 9 in the morning till 9 or 10 at night, with sundry breaks.
Yeah.
Come home late Thursday night. And then the weekends vary. I might have a concert or family commitments. There's no real consistent
absolutely
thing about it.
Yeah. So one of those weeks you could have 4 concerts within that week,
and no teaching,
or another week you might be making up some teaching because you had concerts the previous week.
I share my college teaching, so I don't need to be there every week of the academic year, and it's worked really well because I can get colleagues. I get sort of first pick as I'm the oldest and the bossiest. So I'll pick in weeks I can't do. I'll arrange for my colleagues to teach them. So it's a really lovely flexibility to that, and I know in advance. So weeks I don't need to be at college, I could be anywhere doing solo gigs, chamber music, concertos, the odd session in London. We bumped into each other on the train.
Yeah,
I was heading in to do the last ever Endeavour session.
That's
Morse
right.
Endeavour things. And
yes.
So it's I've never lost the joy in it being so varied.
Yeah. And let's go back to the tennis.
Oh yeah.
So are you quite competitive? Do you compete?
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm competitive by nature,
right?
But in a sort of positive kind of way. You know, I don't chuck my racket around when I lose. But I'm a sort of a middle-aged club player. But I really enjoy it, and so I take part in club competitions. I play for in one of the Oxfordshire leagues in one of the men's teams at the club.
Yeah.
And we have various rolling ladder competitions and whatnot. So I play in all of those just to make sure I'm playing different people. And it's interesting, the relationship between both performance psychology as a musician and when you're playing sport, learning to concentrate and relax and concentrate on what you're doing in the moment is exactly the same as what we try and do as a musician. And also the principles of practice and understanding the difference between playing tennis or playing your instrument and practicing tennis or practicing your instrument. There's so many direct parallels there. And because I don't have time to practice playing tennis, I have to accept the fact that improvements will happen very gradually.
This is incredibly pertinent to what I'm going through, because I've started playing golf in the last couple of years, and it's absolutely the same thing. It's you have to accept a fairly minimal return in terms of improvement if you don't put in the hours. It's
absolutely. I know if I can find a ball machine in the court and I drill one shot, for an hour, it will improve significantly in that hour. But I don't really get time to do that very much. So most of what I do is playing, not focused, repetitive drilling of one task. And that's where skill acquisition really happens, is in focused repetition. And as a musician, that's what I do. I'm very focused on working in that way when I'm practicing, and I understand the benefits of that, whatever skill you're trying to acquire. So it's really interesting, but it's frustrating. I don't have the time. It's interesting having the knowledge and experience to understand how skill acquisition works, but I enjoy it. It's recreation for me, so I try not to get too het up.
Are you a good or a bad loser?
I'm a good loser, in terms of my deportment at the time.
Yes, but quite self-critical afterwards.
But it's annoying. It's things. I played at university. I played more squash than tennis, and losing always stings, but you get over it and you learn from it. The crucial thing, like making mistakes when you're practicing or performing on your instrument, is learning from it. So, also without getting too intense about it, if I have lost to someone playing tennis, I'll give it some thought to try to understand what I might do differently next time I play that person. But it's recreation. You have to get some balance on these things.
It has to be fun, otherwise, if it's causing you stress, it's not.
Find another way to relax. Yeah, absolutely.
And actually, talking about sport, I mean, because I suppose Australia has such a reputation for kind of outdoorsy kind of active living. Were you sporty as a kid?
Yeah. Frightfully so.
Really? Did you play everything?
I started tennis lessons and swimming coaching club, 3 times a week sort of thing, both at the age of 7. But I also played club hockey, cricket, Aussie rules football. When I was at university, I started canoeing quite hardcore. Trained for a 2-day downriver, first day whitewater, second day flatwater race with a colleague in a double kayak, which we trained for months, and I really loved it. I loved being on, in, or under water, and training in rapids. The week before the race, we broke the bar. We tipped out. It snapped in half and went over a waterfall. And we lost the boat. We never did the race. A strange experience.
Gosh.
But yeah.
After all that training.
I know.
Wow.
I did some little bit of competitive cycling. I loved surfing. So that was one of my key sort of recreational things from my mid-teens up to when I left Australia. Little bit of windsurfing. It's one of the most frustrating things to learn to do. But Perth has lots of water, river and sea. And it's the third windiest city in the world. So it's a mecca for sailing, windsurfing, kite surfing, water sports generally. So yeah, I loved all of that stuff. I couldn't get enough of it.
Yeah.
And so practice, when I was quite young, practice took something of a back seat. And practice for me didn't really kick in until my mid-teens upwards. But then, fortunately, I increasingly fell in love with it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, presumably that you must seriously miss the climate.
I do, inevitably. But ultimately, family and social connections are more important. And I think I was incredibly lucky I feel incredibly lucky to have grown up there in lovely climate with things I love to do as part of a loving family. And it was really my entire childhood. I feel really privileged to say that it was a happy childhood in a beautiful place with lovely people. And my parents aren't alive, but I'm very much in touch with my two brothers who are still there. And friends that I made during my time at university are still some of my closest friends. So yeah, more than anything.
So do you manage to get back often?
I over the 33 years I've been in the UK, I've managed on average probably once every 18 months-ish. Now I haven't been since 2019 because of lockdown, and it didn't open up until that, not terribly long ago in the general scheme of things. Yeah. So yeah, definitely there's nothing in the diary, but definitely plans to be back sooner rather than later.
Yeah, on the agenda. And I have to ask about, because one of the things that, I mean, we went to Australia about just over 10 years ago. We absolutely loved it. But we never ventured outside the cities. But one thing I always think about is people talking about, the population of spiders and snakes and things like that. Are you scared of spiders and snakes? Or are you okay? You pretty good with them?
I'm fine with them here because they tend not to bite you in a poisonous kind of way.
Yeah.
But I mean, the most important thing to say is seeing a poisonous snake or a poisonous spider in Australia is a rarity. It's, I've seen redback spiders are the most common poisonous spider in Western Australia, but they tend to hide in nooks and crannies. They don't shove your fingers into nooks and crannies.
And then you'll be fine.
Basically. So it's the sort of thing, because it's dangerous and there's an air of danger and excitement about it. Snakes, spiders and sharks are massively over hyped outside Australia.
Compared to the relative risk, which is probably
absolutely
tiny.
So. Yeah. Weirdly, shark attacks have increased significantly in number since I left Australia. I surfed in places where there have been now fatal shark attacks recently, whereas when I was surfing, there hadn't been fatal shark attacks in those places for 50 to 70 years.
Wow.
But, we used to paddle quite a way offshore, and once or twice you see pods of dolphins, and when you see the fins, there is initially a moment of panic, but then you very quickly realise they're dolphins because they do that rather than that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And there's no panic. But I think sharks and crocodiles, they do occasionally eat people, and because it's such a horrific thought, it's no surprise that people have made films about them and make something out of them, because it is the thing you don't want to happen. Whereas,
but it's true. I suppose it's like one of those, the old kind of story of you're more likely to
trip over your underpants. Absolutely.
Or meet tragedy crossing the road than with, say, a roller coaster. But yet the thought of being in a roller coaster, because of that complete submission of control, I think, and there is something a little bit more dramatic about it that it seems more terrifying, even though statistically it's very unlikely. Okay, brilliant. So let's go back just quickly. One other question about, so we've been talking about your career. If you could go back in time to young Craig starting out, so you've chosen this path, what piece of advice would you give yourself? Is there anything that you think would have made a difference, or do you think you would have followed the path you did anyway?
I think I would have followed the path I did anyway. But if I was going to offer myself some salutary advice, it would be in relation to how I practiced. That binge practicing doesn't work. That if you really want to acquire skills or knowledge, for me at least, and also for everyone I've ever met, it has to be drip fed in. So if I'm talking to kids who, 7, 8 year olds, I'd say 5 minutes a day of practice is infinitely more profitable than 30 minutes on one day. And I did a couple of times bite off too many things, and consequently didn't do a really well prepared job of all of those things. And, they will have negative consequences. So preparing, I would be encouraging myself to look way ahead in the diary, to start preparing really early and just drip feed that information and those necessary skills you're trying to acquire in little and often, rather than leaving it too late and having to stay up till 3 a.m, bashing notes into your head. That would be the main thing. Otherwise, I was pretty ambitious and career focused, and but in practical terms, that would be the advice to myself. Don't leave things late. Don't procrastinate. Make sure you assess the difficulty level of the things that you need to learn and when you need to learn them by, and start dripping them in time so you don't put yourself under deadline pressure. Yeah,
that sounds all too familiar.
Slightly boring bit of advice, really. I was after something more glamorous, but that's how I would have reorganized myself.
Yeah, but it is human nature, isn't it, to procrastinate and leave things, and then suddenly you sometimes realize you've bitten off a little bit more than you could chew. But no, that's really interesting. Okay, so the last segment is we're going to do 10 quick questions. Okay, so just whatever comes into your head. Okay, so first of all, are you an early bird or a night owl?
Both, but night owl more by nature. But sorry, you want quick answers to these?
Okay,
you're not going to get them.
No, keep going.
Getting up like pre-dawn to either play golf with my dad or go surfing, or these days to play tennis, is the best reason to get up in the morning. Otherwise, night owl.
Nice. Very good. Tea or coffee?
Neither. I don't drink hot drinks. I never graduated to adult non-alcoholic beverages.
That is crazy. I'm exactly the same.
I literally have never had a cup of tea or coffee. Hot chocolate doesn't appeal at all.
No.
The only time I'd have anything hot in a cup would be if I was unwell, in which case I might have herbal tea or your classic garlic ginger honey sort of drink. But otherwise,
that's very interesting. We're a very kind of small minority, but I find the sensation of hot liquid passing my lips very strange. A lemon sip is a trauma for me.
Yeah. For starters, it has to have cooled down. My mouth sensitivity is, I think, higher than regular tea coffee drinkers.
Yeah.
So for me, those drinks, I will do it when I'm unwell.
Yes.
But otherwise,
Otherwise not.
No.
Okay. What's your favourite food?
My immediate response is chocolate, but I'm embarrassed about that. Otherwise, if I had to pick one, I'd go with fruit.
Okay.
It's so amazingly varied in colour and taste. And if I was saying I was only going to be able to eat one food, then I'll have fruit. But these things are impossible. I love Indian food, Italian food, an amazing salad. It's an impossible question to answer, but I'll go with fruit if I must.
Well, your first instinct was chocolate, we'll go with that.
Yeah, let's go with that. Yeah, that's the honest one.
But fruit is the more wholesome answer.
Yeah.
Okay. What about what's your kind of most used social media platform?
Well, Facebook just makes me sound old. So Instagram. I use for professional purposes. I use Instagram and Facebook, and for personal purposes, I literally just have a couple of groups of friends on WhatsApp or Messenger, and I don't use social media for personal things. I did when it was new, but so I use it professionally, and it's an amazing way to reach people. But Instagram and Facebook are the two I use regularly.
What would be the first app you look at in the morning?
Either or. It just depends which one falls under my thumb first.
Yeah. Okay, cool. If you could only play music by one composer, who would it be?
It's got to be Bach. The more you play, the more you find that's incredibly, unfathomably sort of genius about it. And just the more you play, the more you appreciate it. And if it was a desert island, you can only take music of one composer, then I know I could continue exploring Bach to the end of my days. And, there's what have become regarded as the lute works, but overlap with cello suites and the violin suites and partitas. Bach is the most universal of music, and you can play it on its original scoring or individual instruments or with a tuba quartet or guitar. It still sounds like Bach.
Yes.
And you can phrase it and enjoy it and appreciate it and comprehend it regardless of what instrument you're playing. So it has to be Bach.
Yeah, and it sounds so beautiful on the guitar as well, doesn't it?
We have to think so. We do think so.
But your second answer may be John Denver.
I can work my way through his
It mightn't take quite as long.
No.
Okay, brilliant. Do you have a favourite concert hall that you've ever played in?
The most rewarding experiences I've had have been in small, really resonant venues. The one that leaps to mind is a college chapel in Cambridge, and I can't remember. I want to say Girton, but I'm not sure. It's beautiful, and it's old, and it's resonant, and it's just dripping with atmosphere. Same with, I was musician in residence at Oriel College, Oxford, for a couple of years, and I played in their chapel a number of times. And I've had some of my most rewarding experiences, relaxed and just swimming in resonance in those spaces. Wigmore is an amazing place to play, but it's not so relaxing. I haven't played there enough to feel like it's home away from home. So the most, enjoyable experiences have been in some of those smaller venues where I don't feel as pressured as I would be at the South Bank Centre or, Percussion QEH or Albert Hall or Wigmore. So, to be able to sit back and let that resonance swim around and just enjoy what I'm doing that's incredibly rewarding.
Yeah. And with when you play in a big hall, because by nature the guitar, there's you can't force a dynamic beyond its natural level, kind of habitat. Do you, in a huge hall, do you usually get some form of amplification or some kind of boost?
It depends on the audience size. If I was at the Bridgewater Hall in Manchester, which has lovely acoustic, if it's just the stalls, if there's 700 odd people in the stalls and perhaps a little bit in the lower circle, then I wouldn't amplify. But if you're trying to reach the top back of the hall, then yes, I would.
Right.
Yeah, you have to be pragmatic about these things.
But I mean, nowadays it's so natural, the sound that they get.
You can do it with really high quality. I have a really good little amplification system that sits right beside me, so the sound is coming from my physical space, not from speakers placed way away in the hall.
Yes.
So you can do it to a very high quality, and it can feel and sound very natural. It's really important that people can hear. I'd rather be too loud than not loud enough. You want people to be able to appreciate what you're doing and the resonance of the instrument, and not just the percussive pluck sound at the beginning of the sound.
Yeah, absolutely. Because when we play with you, you often use a tiny little...
I do. This
little boost. Yeah.
Box that sits right beside me on the chair, yeah.
Because otherwise, balance-wise, just to find a natural balance, we can all play kind of the way we want to play without one of us forcing an unnatural kind of dynamic.
It feels more natural for the audience listening experience if I am boosted a little bit.
Yeah,
it's just the way it is.
Cool. Okay. What do you listen to in the car?
Mostly Radio 4. It's not a great environment for listening to music. You know, you can't appreciate the finer details. So, mostly Radio 4, some Radio 3. So I'll get bored eventually, and depending on the length of the drive, and then flick around.
Yeah.
So, yeah, absolutely everything from the poppy stations like Heart, Radio 2, Radio 3. One of my colleagues at college, Tom McKinney, who he was at college in the era when I was sharing students with my teacher. So Tom had lessons mostly with my teacher, but a little bit with me as well. So he's a colleague now, and Tom's doing increasing amounts on Radio 3. He started off mainly presenting live concerts, but now he's doing regular, some of the morning things, record review, some other independent programs. So, I like to, it sort of opened my ears increasingly to Radio 3.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I have the odd little mindless trip into some of the pop stuff, but Radio 4 is my go-to in the car. And sometimes I'll put something on streaming, some comedy or something as well.
Yeah.
Variety.
Do you have a go-to, like if it's, 2 a.m. and you're feeling tired and you need something to kind of give you a bit of a boost? If I'm really in need of a boost, I stop and sleep. Right. Fair. That is the safe.
Absolutely.
Solution.
But otherwise, anything loud.
Anything loud.
So one of my students introduced me to a sort of joke metal band called Steel Panther.
Okay.
Who were very loud and very rude and very silly. And so, a couple of Steel Panther songs might perk me up in the morning. Brilliant.
Okay, what about, do you have a most embarrassing moment on stage?
Well, too many.
Too many.
It's a question of choosing which one to share. So I'll go with, in my percussion playing days, it's quite theatrical playing percussion. You often sit when you're not doing anything, and then you stand up to play. And I can't remember what piece it was, but I had a very quiet little note, single thing to play on the triangle, but it's the crowning glory of this particular moment. And so you stand up and you hold the triangle dangles from a clip, and you pick it up and hold it. And to play a triangle very quietly is really hard. You tap just the top corner with the tip of the triangle beater. So I stood up to do this, and when you move, obviously audience are visually drawn to you.
Something's coming.
And you do this, and you stand up, and as the moment approaches, you hold the triangle up, and you just tap it so lightly. So I did this, and I missed. And I think, what do I do now? So I pretended I'd hit it, and just sort of went a sort of self-congratulatory smile that I had crowned this beautiful moment. Amazing. So effectively. So that was embarrassing. Let's go with that one.
Okay, brilliant. Do you have a favourite time of year?
Oh, in the UK, actually pretty much anywhere in the world, it has to be when we're definitely into spring, when the glorious days of summer are yet to come. It feels like early morning, when the bulk of the day is ahead of you and you're excited about what you can do with it. I feel that way about mid-spring, when it's warmer, when, as we are now, the time has changed and the evenings are longer. You can play some early evening tennis. Good. And it has so much energy about it. And obviously, particularly in this part of the Northern Hemisphere, the daffodils are up, the trees are budding. It has this incredible energy about it. And
it's like
really,
this renewal.
Yeah, absolutely so.
Yeah,
and I love the feeling of that.
Great. And your last question, what is your guilty pleasure?
Well, I'd mentioned chocolate before, so it's chocolate, but if I'm being honest, it's also the odd appreciation of cheesy pop songs, a bit of Ed Sheeran, a bit of Taylor Swift. That's going to constitute guilty pleasure for me.
Nice. Well, thanks so much for talking to me, Craig.
Absolute pleasure.
It's been great fun, and look forward to playing with you in May.
Absolutely.
Brilliant.
Yeah, can't wait.
Thanks, Craig.
Thanks, Owen.